How would you feel if you discovered that the children you raised, loved, and protected turn out not to be yours? How would you react if the man you called your best friend, the godfather to your kids, was actually their real father? And what would you do if the woman you married, your wife of 15 years, had been sleeping with him behind your back for over a decade? That's the gut-wrenching truth a Texas police officer discovered too late. A simple DNA test destroyed his entire reality. And when the truth came out, so did the gun. This wasn't just betrayal. It was blood. And it was personal. This is the shocking true story of a Texas cop betrayed by the two people he trusted most. A secret affair, 3 children, and one deadly revelation that ended in a double homicide. Before we dive into this heartbreaking case, make sure to like this video and subscribe to new true crime stories, where betrayal meets justice. Detective Mark Trent was known around his small Texas town as a man of honor. A 42-year-old decorated officer with over 18 years on the force, Mark was respected by colleagues, admired by his community, and loved deeply by those who knew him. At home, he was a devoted husband to Carla Trent, his high school sweetheart turned wife of 15 years. Together, they had 3 beautiful children, 2 boys and a girl, all under the age of 13. To the outside world, they were the picture of a perfect family. Mark was the kind of father who never missed a school recital. He was the coach at Little League, the one grilling hot dogs at weekend barbecues, and always the first to show up when anyone needed help. But his closest bond, outside of family, was with his best friend, Anthony Rivas. They had been inseparable since academy days. Anthony was the kid's godfather, Marcus's trusted partner during his early years on the force, and the best man at his wedding. Their friendship was like brotherhood. But behind the laughter, inside jokes, and years of shared memories was a secret so devastating. It would soon tear everything apart. Mark and Anthony had met at the police academy nearly 2 decades earlier. From day one, they clicked. Same work ethic, same dry humor, same commitment to service. They rose through the ranks together, served on patrol together, and even shared a near-death experience during a shootout early in their careers. That moment sealed their bond for life, or so Mark thought. Carla met Anthony through Mark, of course. She was polite, respectful, and friendly, as any wife would be to her husband's closest friend. At first, their interactions were harmless, casual laughs during double dates, shared conversations at family events, the kind of innocent familiarity that comes with years of shared friendship. But over time, something shifted. It started with subtle glances when Mark wasn't looking, a brush of hands during backyard cookouts, lingering eye contact that lasted a beat too long. No one noticed, not even Mark. Anthony was around often, too often. When Mark worked late shifts or took weekend assignments, Anthony would stop by to check in on Carla and the kids. He brought gifts, fixed things around the house, and became a regular presence during Mark's absence. And Carla didn't resist. The affair began innocently, if that's even possible. A one-time mistake, Carla would later say. A moment of weakness. But that moment spiraled into years. Over a decade, to be exact. All 3 children were born during this time. And although Mark had no reason to question their paternity, after all, they all called him Daddy, the truth was far darker. Anthony, somehow, was always around when Carla was pregnant. He celebrated each birth like they were his own. He was even in the delivery room for the second child, because Mark was on assignment out of state. No one raised an eyebrow. Not Carla's family. Not Anthony's girlfriend, who eventually left him for being too distant. But there were cracks in the story. Occasional fights between Mark and Carla about Anthony being too close. Carla's defensiveness, Mark's growing suspicions, which he always brushed off as overthinking. Still, the betrayal stayed hidden, buried beneath years of memories, photos, birthdays, and holidays. Until one simple conversation with a coworker about a DNA ancestry kit would change everything. The affair between Carla and Anthony wasn't a whirlwind of passion. It was calculated, repetitive, and quiet. A secret routine woven into everyday life. At first, it was just fleeting moments, intimate glances, a shared glass of wine when Mark was on night duty. Then came late-night texts that Carla would quickly delete. Secret hotel meetups during Anthony's lunch breaks. Lies disguised as errands and community events. Anthony justified it to himself as love, something he claimed had just happened. But deep down, even he knew what he was doing. He was stealing his best friend's life, one lie at a time. Carla was torn at first. She still claimed to love Mark, or at least the life he provided. But as the years went on, her emotional connection to Anthony deepened. There were nights when she cried in Anthony's arms about her guilt, only to end up in bed with him again hours later. And Mark was clueless. His long shifts with the department's narcotics task force made him an easy target. He chalked up Carla's distance to stress and raising 3 kids. He missed the signs. The extra care she took getting dressed when Anthony was coming over, the secretive phone habits, the sudden shifts in mood. To the outside world, Anthony remained Uncle Tony, the lovable, dependable family friend. He attended every birthday, helped with homework, took the kids to the park. One of the boys even said he wanted to be just like Uncle Tony when he grew up. That cut deeper than anyone knew. Behind closed doors, Anthony had a twisted attachment to the kids. He treated them like his own because, biologically, they were. But he never dared reveal the truth. It was safer to let Mark raise them. After all, Mark provided the house, the stability, the illusion of a happy home. But secrets don't stay buried forever. When the youngest child began asking questions about ancestry for a school project, Mark casually suggested doing one of those at-home DNA kits. He thought it would be fun, educational, even. Something to connect the family's heritage. Carla froze. She tried to talk him out of it. Said it was unnecessary. Even got angry. But Mark brushed it off as her being overly sensitive. When the results came back, they didn't just show ancestral roots. They showed something else. Something that would bring Mark's entire world crashing down. All 3 children had no genetic connection to him. The email notification came in on a Thursday evening. Mark had just gotten home from a long shift and was sitting on the couch, sipping a cold beer while the kids played video games in the next room. Carla was in the kitchen, unusually quiet. When he clicked the link from the DNA testing service, he expected a colorful breakdown of his ancestry, maybe some distant Irish roots, or a surprising link to royalty. What he saw instead was confusion. His profile was fully set up, but the system flagged an alert. Possible parent mismatch detected. At first, Mark thought it was a glitch. He called customer support, puzzled. They confirmed the results. "I'm sorry, Mr. Trent," the agent said. "According to the data, there's no genetic match between you and the 3 children linked to your account." Mark stared at the screen. His hand trembled slightly. He tried again, checking the test codes, reviewing every input. But there was no mistake. 3 children. None were his. Still in disbelief, Mark quietly sent in a second round of kits, this time using a different lab, without telling Carla. He submitted fresh samples from each child, swabbing them while they watched cartoons, thinking it was a game. 2 weeks later, the results came in. The same. No biological connection. That night, something inside Mark broke. He didn't confront Carla immediately. Instead, he became a shadow in his own home. Watching, listening, piecing together a puzzle he never knew existed. Every memory, every laugh, every photo suddenly twisted with suspicion. He started going through old phone records, texts, bank statements. He even installed a small camera in the living room while pretending to fix a broken socket. The more he uncovered, the more the pattern became clear. Anthony, the only man who'd been there from the beginning, the one constant in their lives. Late-night calls between Carla and Anthony. Hotel charges billed to Anthony's name that lined up with weekends Mark had worked out of town. Even a necklace Mark thought he had bought for Carla was actually from Anthony, just repackaged in an old box Mark had used years ago. One night, Mark followed Carla. She told him she was heading to the grocery store. Instead, she met Anthony at a parking lot on the edge of town. Mark watched from his unmarked cruiser as the two embraced in the shadows. He didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, he drove home, sat in his patrol car for hours, and stared at a picture of his kids taped to his dashboard. The same kids he'd bathed, fed, and rocked to sleep for over a decade. The same kids who weren't his. His thoughts spiraled. Rage. Shame. Betrayal. Then came the darkest one of all. Had they ever loved him at all? The next morning, Mark filed for a few personal days. Said he needed rest. He stopped responding to texts. Stopped showing up to work. And on the morning of what would be the final confrontation, he loaded his service weapon, printed out the DNA results, and placed them in a manila envelope. Then he went looking for answers and blood. It was a quiet Sunday morning in suburban Texas. The kind of morning where sprinklers tick across front lawns and neighbors sip coffee on porches. But inside the Trent household, a storm was brewing. Mark waited until the kids were dropped off at his mother's house for a weekend visit, something Carla insisted on doing herself. She returned just before 11 a.m., expecting a normal day. But Mark had other plans. He was waiting in the living room, dressed in his off-duty clothes, but with his badge on the table and his service weapon holstered at his side. The manila envelope sat next to him, sealed but screaming with truth. "Sit down," he said calmly as she walked in. Carla froze. Something in his tone, the stillness in the room, told her this wasn't just another marital argument. She sat. Mark slid the envelope across the table. "Open it." Her hands trembled as she peeled it open. When she saw the DNA test results, her breath caught in her throat. The color drained from her face. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Oh, it's exactly what I think," Mark replied. His voice was cold, distant, like it belonged to someone else. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could explain, the front door creaked open. Anthony. He had used the spare key. Probably expected Carla to be alone. Probably planned to sneak in like he always had. Mark turned to face him. "Good. I was hoping you'd show up." Anthony's smile faded instantly. He took one look at Mark's face, then at Carla's trembling body, and froze. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Mark stood. "Sit down." Anthony didn't move. "I said sit down." Anthony obeyed. Mark paced for a moment, then stopped in front of them. He pulled the gun from his holster and set it on the table, not pointing it, not threatening, just letting it rest there. The weight of it filled the room. "For 15 years, Mark said, I've lived a lie, raised children that weren't mine, let my best friend into my home, while he was screwing my wife." "Mark, please," Carla began. "Shut up," he snapped. "You don't get to talk right now." Anthony raised his hand slightly. "Look, man, I'm sorry. You didn't mean to have 3 kids with my wife." Silence. "You know what hurts most?" Mark said, his voice cracking for the first time. "I love those kids. Still do. They're my whole world. And now I don't even know who I am anymore." Tears welled in Carla's eyes. "We never meant to hurt you." "But you did," Mark whispered. Then, without warning, he grabbed the gun and fired. One shot, straight into Anthony's chest. He fell backward, gasping for air, blood soaking through his shirt. Carla screamed. Before she could run, Mark turned the gun on her. "You killed us," he said quietly. The second shot rang out. Neighbors would later say they heard what sounded like a firecracker. Then a second one. Then silence. When police arrived minutes later, alerted by a neighbor who heard the screams and shots, they found Anthony dead by the sofa. Carla slumped beside him, and Mark sitting on the floor, gun resting in his lap, tears streaming down his face. He didn't resist. Didn't run. "I'm done," he said simply. They took everything. He was arrested on the spot, still covered in the blood of the 2 people who'd shattered his life. The scene was quiet when backup arrived. Too quiet. Officers from the local precinct, many of whom had known Mark Trent for years, walked into a nightmare. Anthony Rivas, once considered part of the extended law enforcement family, lay dead from a close-range gunshot wound. Carla Trent, barely identifiable under the pool of blood beneath her, had been shot in the chest and died within moments of impact. And there, sitting against the wall, Mark Trent. His badge lay on the coffee table. His service weapon sat at his feet. His eyes were bloodshot and glassy, a man unraveled. "I'm not going to fight you," he said to the arresting officer. "I just want to see my kids one last time." But there was no last time. Mark was handcuffed and taken into custody without incident. The ride to the station was silent, no radio chatter, no questions. Just a heavy, stunned silence that filled the cruiser like smoke. At the station, Mark waived his right to an attorney. He gave a full confession, detailing everything. The DNA results, the second lab confirmation, the confrontation, and the moment he decided to pull the trigger. The confession lasted over 2 hours. No yelling, no theatrics, just the quiet, steady voice of a man whose world had been torn to shreds. When asked why he didn't just walk away, Mark said, "I could have. Maybe I should have. But when you realize your entire life is a lie, when you look into the faces of your children and see the man who betrayed you, something inside you dies. And what's left? I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I was just broken." The public response was immediate and divisive. Some painted Mark as a monster, another man with a badge who cracked under pressure and took 2 lives in cold blood. Others saw him as a tragic figure, betrayed by his wife and best friend, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love him. News outlets ran headline after headline. Texas cop kills wife, best friend over paternity shocker. DNA results lead to double murder in quiet suburb. Hero cop or killer. The case that's dividing a community. Meanwhile, the children were taken into protective custody and later placed with Carla's sister, pending full custody hearings. They were told the truth in pieces, enough to understand that their lives would never be the same again. Marcus's police record was wiped clean of honors and commendations. He was stripped of his title, pension, and all formal recognition. But none of it mattered to him. He'd lost his family. He said nothing in court. No apologies. No pleas for mercy. Just a hollow stare, like the fire inside him had already burned to ash. The trial of Mark Trent began 6 months after the murders. His defense team didn't argue innocence. They argued temporary insanity, citing emotional trauma, betrayal, and psychological collapse as mitigating factors. Expert witnesses testified that the revelation of non-paternity, especially in the context of repeated betrayal by both a spouse and a lifelong friend, could trigger a dissociative break in even the most stable individuals. The prosecution, however, painted a clearer picture, a man who planned a double execution. They highlighted the printed DNA results, the loaded weapon, and the calculated way Mark waited for both victims to be in the house. This wasn't a crime of passion, they argued. It was premeditated murder. The jury deliberated for just over 10 hours. Mark Trent was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. The judge handed down 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In a statement following sentencing, the district attorney said, "While we acknowledge the deep emotional pain Mr. Trent experienced, justice cannot be selective. Murder, no matter the motive, must be held accountable." Outside the courthouse, opinions remained divided. Some wept for the children. Others muttered that Mark was a good man who broke. But regardless of where the public stood, one thing was clear. The man once seen as the moral compass of his department would die behind bars. This story leaves behind more than just blood. It leaves a trail of broken trust, shattered identity, and 3 innocent children caught in the wreckage of choices they never made. Mark Trent wasn't just a man betrayed. He was a father stripped of fatherhood, a husband lied to for over a decade, and a friend stabbed where it hurt most, at home. But murder is never the answer. When pain turns to rage, the consequences are irreversible. What would you have done in his shoes? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real-life stories of betrayal, justice, and the human mind pushed to its limit, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Because on this channel, the truth is never what it seems.